Hey everyone, welcome to the Lazy Paddler Investing Show.
I'm Kimberly Olivares,
And I'm Harlan Bea.
and today we're discussing the company you did not know about that owns every luxury brand you can think of.
And also lots you can't think of. Basically, half of all airport advertisers. I own this stock and I believe in it. This is a big company. Its trailing 12-month revenues are about 80 billion euros, but it doesn't get a lot of media coverage in the United States. They own a large number of luxury brands, and it's a large enough company to be in various mutual funds and some large cap European indexes.
Yeah, so today we're bringing you old news from an old company, LVMH Moët Hennessy Louis Vuitton SE, in the US known as LVMH, and you can find it on America over-the-counter exchange at LVMUY.
Cool. So tell me, Kim, what does LVMH do?
Yeah, so as Harlan mentioned, they own pretty much every popular brand that you can think of. So in the category of fashion, they own brands like Tiffany and Co., Louis Vuitton, Fendi, Christian Dior, which are pretty popular brands. And then they also own like some wines. Some examples are Dom Perignon, and then perfumes and cosmetics as well. The one that surprised me a lot was that they own Fenty Beauty by Rihanna, which I did not know about, which is very popular here. And yeah, some watches and jewelry, like Bulgari. And they also own Sephora, which is pretty interesting. And then something we're going to dive a little bit deeper in this episode is their leisure park in Paris, which is called Jardin de Acclimation. Yes.
So I find their stable of companies to be like ridiculously large and broad. So they're basically into all elements of fashion, leather goods, jewelry, perfume, and also branch out into wines and also like whiskeys, I believe, and also like champagne and stuff like that. I guess wine and champagne are the same thing, kind of. But yeah, so it's basically like all of this luxury, or I get what I would call the appearance of luxury, right? Things that you buy that are obviously expensive.
Yeah.
So what's your take on some of these companies? Like, are any of these companies aspirational brands, things where you're like, oh, I'd really like to have one of those, or things that you maybe already like?
Yeah, well, I definitely I like their fashion brands. I personally don't own any of their pieces yet, but it's something that I definitely would want to. I'm more familiar with like their cosmetics, like I was saying. So like Fenty Beauty by Rihanna is something I really support and use. And then like their benefit cosmetics. So yeah, definitely like their area of like perfumes and cosmetics is of my interest. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I think the thing that so I don't identify with any of these brands personally. Um, the reason why me and my wife, ended up buying this company was because she's a big fan of what was the Louis Vuitton, actually. So she likes the purses. They ended up doing a collaboration with, now I'm going to forget her name, uh, Kusama. Oh, what's her first name? She's an artist. Her thing is polka dots. So she's like very like she's very polka dots. So like it's basically polka dots on everything. And so June ended up having like she appreciated that they did these interesting and artistic takes on the Louis Vuitton products with various artists, with Kusama being one of them. And then just when we started looking into it more, like the idea that they own all these sort of high-end brands, just things that you hear about but you don't necessarily want to buy because they're so expensive, like Dom
Yeah.
Perignon, right? Like, yeah, I might consider buying some Dom Perignon if I had like a wedding to like celebrate or something like that, but even then I probably wouldn't. I'm not a champagne person. But like fashion wise, like would I ever go buy a Fendi or a Christian Dior or something on purpose? Not necessarily, but if it happened to be something that like fit me and looked good, maybe. But I wouldn't be looking for it particularly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like something like Sephora, I feel like is a big enough consumer brand that so many people would go and so many people would appreciate it. Like
Yeah.
you were talking about Fenty Beauty by Rihanna. Is that like is that like a big brand or is that a smaller brand?
It's kind of a smaller brand, but it's supported a lot because of the fact that it's by Rihanna, which is a pretty well-known singer. It's actually sold in Sephora, so yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And what's Benefit Cosmetics?
It's another cosmetic brand also sold in Sephora. Yeah, that one doesn't have like a specific like artist tied to it, but yeah, also a well-known brand.
Okay, it's interesting because if you think about a company like Costco, for example, Costco has Kirkland brand stuff.
Yeah.
And Kirkland basically rebrands other people's things to be sold at Costco kind of under cover of darkness, right? There's basically like, oh, these jeans, they're made by the same company that makes Calvin Klein, maybe. If you can figure it out, like good on you, but they're basically made by some other popular brand or like maybe Kirkland's, 20-year-old scotch would be made by a distillery you would know, but you can't be sure exactly who it is because they keep it a secret.
Mm.
Or if you go to Target, you've got things like Massimo at Target, which is like a brand that got bought by another brand that got bought by another brand and eventually landed at Target because they went bankrupt so many times. I'm probably
Yeah.
making some of that up. I don't know actually the history of Massimo, but these brands eventually land with these large conglomerates, which LVMH is a big conglomerate, right? And then I guess it's just interesting because LVMH is able to keep all of their brands feeling like independent companies. Like if you had asked me before I found LVMH, if you had asked me who owns Tiffany, I'd be like, "What are you talking about? Who owns Tiffany?
Yeah.
Somebody owns Tiffany? Like why would Tiffany need to be owned by anybody? Aren't they successful in and of themselves? I mean, the Blue Box and like everybody in Breakfast at Tiffany's is a whole movie with its name in the title, right?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it's definitely similar. Like I said, I was very surprised to see that Fenty Beauty by Rihanna was owned by LVMH because Rihanna's a really big artist. So I didn't expect, yeah, I thought she was like an independent member. But yeah,
Well, and
surprising.
usually when there's like a collaboration done,
Mhm.
it's like when people collaborate with Nike, for example, you know that it's Nike, and Nike is not like hiding the fact that it's Nike, but
Yeah.
LVMH kind of hides the fact that it's back there, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're here, but we're like the corporate parent who's like letting
Yeah.
the little subsidiary kids go play in the yard
Mm.
and do whatever they want, and like they come back in the house with muddy feet and muddy hands, and they like hose them down, and they're like, "Good job, bring me what you found in the backyard."
Yeah.
It's literally all right. That's figuratively what I imagine is happening with each of these companies. But
Yeah.
I will say this for them: they do a good job of managing these brands. Like I feel like every one of the brands, and by the way, there's more than 60. I think there might be
Yeah.
more than 70 brands in the conglomerate. All of these brands feel like they are unique, both unique and not necessarily related to LVMH. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. I think, yeah, like you were saying, I think they do a good job at managing all of their companies, like especially like a lot of like the fashion brands.
Yeah.
Like I said, it came as a surprise to me. I think those, when you think of those brands, you don't think that they would all be, yeah, with LVMH. Yeah.
So let me make one. important like warning to anyone who might be thinking of this as an idea for their companies. You definitely like this is not investing advice. What we're talking about here, we're just like we're talking about a company that I invest in. Kim, you don't invest in this company, right?
No, I did not.
uh, I will also say that I am awful, absolutely awful at investing in fashion companies. I think every single time I've invested in a fashion company, I've it's either gone bankrupt or it's almost gone bankrupt, and then I'm like, screw it, I'm out. I'm obviously bad at this. Like I owned Lululemon many years ago
Oh,
before it got good. Right when it was kind of going down and kind of in the pits and sagging for nothing for a while. And I'm like, I don't understand this company. I don't buy their stuff. I don't get it. I'm and I'm thinking to myself, I'm obviously not good at fashion. And so I kind of left the whole fashion industry behind in my investing, and I focused on things like high tech, entertainment, and lately electric vehicles and electric power or electrification, that sort of thing. Um, those have been more my, and a little bit in biotech, and a little like and I have some consumer brands, definitely, but not any fashion. So like it's almost a contraindicator that I like this stock. I'm just saying. I don't
yeah.
know if I have the best judgment when it comes to fashion, but their growth seems to be pretty good. Uh, Over the last 10 years, this stock has outperformed the S&P 500 by about double. And it's a large company, like so it's a large cap, and it the thing about large caps is they have a tendency to kind of cap themselves out in terms of growth. It's like, can they keep acquiring more and more things, or can they keep up the growth, the natural growth at their companies? As a company gets bigger and bigger, it's harder to do that, in my opinion. Like when you're selling, when you're selling premium stuff, are there going to be enough customers around to buy that, you know, 100,000th bottle of Dom Perignon that you're selling? I don't know. Hopefully. I mean, that's the objective, right? Making a better society where people can afford these, premium products.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are definitely risks here. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about that weird extra thing that they have, which all right, I'm gonna take the bullet here for you, and I'm gonna try to pronounce this. I do not speak French, and I'm not very good at it. So Jardin d'acclimatation. All right, that's awful. So what is Le Jardin d'acclimatation?
Yeah, so it's actually a theme park. It's definitely a different category than what they're mostly known for. It's like fashion. But yeah, so it's a theme park that's located in Paris, France, and it's actually the capital's only attraction and leisure park. And it was the first one to be created in France, all the way back from 1860. So it's a pretty old leisure park. But yeah, and
So
then
so a lot of people, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. A lot of people will have heard of Disneyland Paris. A lot of Americans will have heard of Disneyland Paris, but Disneyland Paris is actually in where did we find out it was?
it's like close to
It's
Paris, but not.
it's about
Yeah,
20 miles away
like
from
20
Paris.
miles.
It's called Disneyland Paris, but it's like how Disneyland is not actually in LA, but people think it's in LA. It's actually in Anaheim, California. Yeah, it's like that. So Le Jardin d'Acclimatation is the only theme park in Paris, the city.
Yeah. So technically speaking, yeah, they are the only leisure park. A little more information on it. LVMH actually bought into it in 1984, and it currently has 80% share in the park. And it's in partnership with another developer known as, hopefully I don't mispronounce it, Campagne the Alps. But yeah, and it was recently actually renovated back in 2018. So yeah, that's some information. And then it's actually pretty big as well. It's 18 hectares of lands, which is kind of similar, like comparing it to like here, it's kind of like the size of the Pentagon, I would say. Or like Knott's Berry Farm in Bonaparte, California, which is 57 acres. Definitely a lot smaller when in comparison to Disneyland though. And then yeah, some other cool information. It was inspired by Hyde Park in London, and it was actually originally a zoo.
Hmm.
And then today it features like rides, a farm, an aviary with like animals. So yeah, it's definitely a nice family-friendly theme park in Paris. And then yeah, in 2016, Paris Council City company's concession contracted for another 25 years, so it paves the way for more renovations to the theme park. But yes.
Yeah, so like I think they've got this land until 2041 with that contract, which gives them a long runway to do things. And I like that they reinvested in it in 2018. That's cool. It's small, but I think it's a cool idea. I I wonder how much like when you see pictures of it online, it's basically like families with kids, and it reminds me a lot of sort of a Euro, what a European Legoland might look like. If any of you have been to a Legoland, we have one here in San Diego where I live. So there are a lot of sort of smaller rides for kids and fun little thing. They have fun little things like petting zoo kind of things, and I like the idea of it having an aviary. So like Paris is notoriously crowded, right? So the fact that they own this big parkland area is really unique within Paris. So I think they have, and my guess is that people can probably walk or take the public transit there. So they probably have a good amount of visitors. I wonder if this is a thing that they want to build more of, because it's an interesting concept. It's small, it's fun, and it's uniquely European. Whereas, like you think of something like Disneyland, or even something like Knott's Berry Farm wouldn't be a good example that of my comparison in my head because it's a little bit more local. I'm thinking of like Magic Mountain or these sort of like uh, what is it, Great Wolves, or what is the Wolf Lodge thing? Anyway, some of these more American style parks. They're big, they're sprawling. They're
Yes.
not as they're not as accessible to a small child. Like when I took my daughter to Disneyland for the first time, I made a deal with her. This is me having a deal with like a 5 or 6 year old, and I was like, "Look, we're gonna take you to Disneyland. If you get angry, if you get upset, if you cry, we're just gonna leave because I don't have time for that." So like both my wife and I were on board, and we're like this is the situation. That day that we went to Disneyland with my daughter, she must have walked 10 miles and she never complained. She was so much better than I was when I was a kid. I was
Oh,
a little whiner, I'm sure. But because Disneyland is huge by comparison, huge. It's like order 2 orders of magnitude larger than this area. But I think that there is space for them to possibly build more of these. But I don't know how much interest there is. Right? It's like it's a concept, but I don't know how much money they make out of it. I don't know how much it integrates with stuff like Tiffany. Like do you like is there a space for them to like sell Tiffany or Bulgari like leatherware there? I don't know. Does Bulgari even make leatherware? Maybe they make jewelry. Like I'm not that knowledgeable about it, I suppose. So just because you don't know everything about a company doesn't mean you can't invest in them. But you should, I think, strive to know more about them. So thank you for researching this, Kim, so that we know a little bit more about what they do and like what they bring to the table. Um, any last like words about LVMH? How do you think about it in terms of like longevity? What do you think these brands have in store for them for the next 20 years?
Yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed researching this brand because I had heard of Louis Vuitton, the brand, because obviously it's very popular, but I never knew that there was like a yeah, like I never knew that the company that owns Louis Vuitton also owns like Fendi, like since they're kind of known as like competitors in a way. So it's
Hmm.
interesting to know that like yeah, that they're basically owned by the same company. But yeah, in terms of longevity, I definitely feel like the luxury goods industry in general has a lot of potential for growth. I feel like it's something that's always gonna be of interest to people, especially since they have like a lot of like different, they have like a diversity of different things like wine and stuff. Some research I did on like possible growth for the LVMH brand found that I was specifically looking at like a Fortune Business Insights, and they found that the global luxury goods market is expected to grow approximately from like 284 billion in 2023 to like 392 billion by 2030. So yeah, it's an expected compound annual growth rate of 4.7. So that's pretty good. What do you think?
I I always question like when people give predictions like that. I really wonder like what they're thinking because
Yeah.
um like that I don't understand how someone can make a prediction like that with a straight face. I mean,
Yeah.
I I believe that the luxury goods market will probably increase with certain factors like just overall population growth,
Yeah.
the fact that more people will have money as older people who are rich die and give that money to younger people. So the idea that as baby boomers start dying, their money is going to go to their kids and possibly even their grandkids. And this will happen worldwide. I think that's going to expand the number of people who can buy into these brands. On
Yeah.
top of the fact that there just is growing wealth worldwide. One of the things that like people forget to look at things like, so we talk a lot about wealth inequality in the United States politically, and you know you can score a lot of points talking about stuff like that, but the fact remains that when you look at things like the number of wealthy people in the United States, it keeps expanding. And I think this is also true in Europe. So and I have no doubt it's also true in Asia, right? Because the middle class is broadening in Asia, and wealthy people are definitely becoming far more wealthy, and there are more of them. So this is probably a worldwide trend. My bet is that that compound annual growth rate of 4.7% is going to be wrong. The question is, how wrong is it?
Yeah.
And my guess is that it's probably going to be wrong on the small side, on the lower side. I would probably expect a much larger luxury goods market than they're expecting. But that's me. And so like I think they're primed to actually, LVMH is primed to take advantage of that. And I love that point that you just brought up, by the way. The one about them competing with themselves.
Yeah.
So there's a concept of sort of like what do you call it? Oh, I'm blanking on the terminology. It's basically like when you put out a car that's similar to the car you have, you kind of eat into the sales of the earlier car, right? There there is an interesting kind of situation with a large company where if you have a very successful product, I'm thinking in my head right now of Tesla, which I also invest in, by the way. And I invest in Costco. Just since I mentioned all these companies, I invested in all these companies. Um, so when Tesla put out the Model Y, there was questions about whether the Model Y would eat into sales of the Model 3. And it turned out it probably did. Model Y ended up being the world's best selling car by some measures and is Definitely a better seller than the Model 3, but the Model 3 is no slacker either. It also does very well worldwide. But with smaller brands, you're not necessarily eating into the other person's market share because you might be a fan of one or the other because of the way it like attracts you fashion wise. And
Yeah.
so you don't necessarily have that same situation where I only have the money to buy one, like I only have the money to buy one car for myself. Right? I don't like having two cars for me. I can't spend that money. It doesn't make any sense for me.
Yeah.
But having two expensive watches, maybe I could do that. I could put one in a box and like keep one expensive watch for like evenings out and one for special occasions. I could do that. Or maybe I could buy a bunch of like I know women like June has a lot of purses. June has
Yeah.
way more purses than she needs. She'll never listen to this. My wife has more purses than she needs. So, what is like the limit for something like this? I almost feel like the competition draws attention to both brands and expands the customer base rather than the opposite where it actually eats into sales from one or the other. Would you agree with that or
I would say so. I know a lot of people kind of like a lot of different brands. Like they buy into Louis Vuitton, they buy into Fendi. So it's not necessarily like a either or. I think the competition definitely gives people, yeah, more to choose from. So yeah.
okay, cool. Well, is there any final words you want to say about LVMH?
Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to the topic of like their projected like growth, I think it was interesting. I think you brought this up earlier about how like LVMH is kind of like one of those brands that people kind of buy to like look rich is in a way. So I feel like it's interesting because I feel like it's true, you know, a lot of people kind of buy into these brands in order to kind of have that appearance. And I feel like it's something that, yeah, like it's going to continue to be. And so I feel like the luxury goods market is just always going to be like, you know, pretty popular. But yeah. Overall, I think it was really interesting, like researching this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love it if people flexed in a more socially useful way. By like how much they volunteer or how much they contribute to society.
Interesting, yeah.
But hey, the world's the way it is. And sometimes
Yeah.
when you're investing, you got to invest in the world the way it is, not the world the way you wish it was. So I think that's a good final note to rest on. That's all for the Lazy Paddler show, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another treasure from the vaults of my investing portfolio. Stay cool, everybody, and have a wonderful winter. Bye.